Good afternoon, folks. We're just letting people get into the Zoom room. I am Michelle Wagner, and I work with NAMI New Hampshire on the first episode Psychosis Early Serious Mental Illness Initiative. We thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is titled New Hampshire Mental Health and Drug Courts, Treatment Instead of Jail Time. This presentation is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it on the education page of onwardnh.org. In the next couple of days, you're going to receive a follow-up email with links to both an evaluation and the recording. This is a Zoom webinar, so your camera and microphone are off. The question and answer part is working, so please enter any questions you have there. My colleague, Kimberly Somariba, is with us, and she will help field those questions. We have a wonderful panel today. So now I'm going to turn it over to NAMI New Hampshire's Executive Director, Susan Stearns, to do the introductions. Susan?
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And good afternoon, everyone. I will keep these introductions brief because we have a fabulous panel that you all want to hear from. We do have more extensive bios from some of our panelists, and we'll make sure those are posted along with the recording of this webinar so you can read them in their entirety. First, it is my great pleasure to introduce Chief Justice Tina Netto of the New Hampshire Superior Court. Tina Netto was appointed Associate Justice to the New Hampshire Superior Court in 1996, and then in 2011 was appointed Chief Justice of the Superior Court. Justice Netto has a host of well-deserved honors and recognitions that you can read about later, but most importantly, she has been a real leader here in our state. Indeed, beginning in 2006, she spearheaded the effort to open a drug court in Rockingham County Superior Court and presided as the drug court judge. From there, she went on to be a driving force in making sure that drug courts were accessible for all Granite Staters nearly throughout our entire state. It is thanks to her and her colleagues that we have seen such tremendous transformational change in our courts. Along with Chief Justice Netto today, we have Alex Casal, someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years. Alex was appointed as state coordinator for the specialty courts in New Hampshire by Chief Justice Netto in 2013 on what he describes as a volunteer basis. So we all know if you want to get anything done, give Alex a call. And he was also at that time coordinating the drug court. In 2016, he officially became the first state coordinator for New Hampshire, overseeing all of the state's drug courts, mental health courts, and veterans courts. Along with Alex today, we have my very dear friend and colleague, Shelley Golden, coordinator of the Grafton County Mental Health Court. I've had the pleasure of knowing Shelley for a few years. We were children when we started this work. And Shelley brings to her role an enormous amount of experience working with families from very diverse backgrounds. And she has been a leader here in our state around mental health courts, and indeed the facilitator for our statewide mental health court coordinators. And then finally, but certainly not least, we have Ebony Martin with us. I've also known Ebony for a number of years. She is a certified peer support specialist. I first came to know her when she began doing that work as part of the Mental Health Court Community Connections out of Hillsborough County North. So really thrilled that we have such a diverse panel to bring to you today with these varied experiences, all working to indeed ensure truly equal access to justice for all of our loved ones here in the Granite State. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Susan. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Judge Netto. Going to tell us about mental health and drug courts.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Susan. I'm going to first try and share my screen. So hopefully I do that right. Okay. And give me 1 second to get it into slide mode. It will happen. Just need to move this. There we go. Whoops, no. Okay. slideshow from the beginning. There we go. All right. So finally got it up. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad to be here today. It really is a pleasure to talk to community leaders and people who are interested in what we're doing in the court system. And I'm going to talk to you today briefly because I think the most important person to hear from is Ebony about mental health courts and drug courts. And as you heard, we also have some veterans courts, and we now have one family treatment court in Sullivan County where families who risk losing their kids because of substance use disorder are able to reunite with them by engaging in this family drug court program. So the other thing I want to talk about is we have drug courts and we have mental health courts, but everybody knows, I'm sure on this call, that regardless of which program someone finds themselves in, everyone that we deal with has co-occurring issues. So people who are in drug court primarily dealing with substance use disorder, they have co-occurring mental health issues that need addressing. And same for the folks who are in mental health courts, they have co-occurring substance use disorder issues that need addressing. So what I love about both of these programs is the opportunity to make sure we are addressing all those needs in one setting instead of ordering people to go to various different providers. So both of these plans and these programs are designed to treat the whole person. What I also love about drug and mental health courts is it's finally a way for the criminal justice system to say, these are public health issues, and we need to be looking at them as public health issues. You know, when I first started 27 years ago, I saw somebody come in my courtroom and I learned what they did to bring them there, and I didn't learn anything else about them. And we all know there's so much more that goes on for people who are struggling with mental health challenges and substance use issues back when they were very young. There's also trauma that's involved for everybody in our mental health court and treatment courts. So over time, beginning to learn that we are really, in the court system, we are obligated morally and ethically to look at people holistically and to understand that they aren't in our courtrooms just because of something they did. They're in our courtrooms because of a lot of issues that need addressing that we have failed in the criminal justice system to address appropriately. So that's what I love about these two programs. And here, I'm sure you all know this, but here is a slide that really got me going, because as you can see, when we're looking at the general population compared to state prisons and local jails, and we're looking at people with substance use issues and serious mental health issues, they are so overrepresented in our jails and prisons. And that's not the right place for people to get treatment and care for the issues that bring them to the criminal justice system. So this slide told me we need to be doing something different. And I often say when I come to these trainings that if jails or prisons changed behavior, they would be empty, and they're not. So we need to look at this as the public health issue that it is. So here's just a brief history on how drug courts came about. The first one was way back in 1989 in Dade County. And we, in the 80s, you know, we engaged in this war on drugs. And I think about it really as the war on people who use drugs. That's kind of what we were doing. And we were flooded with cases with people who had substance use disorder issues, mental health issues, and the jails and prisons became just overfilled. You may not know this, but the United States has the highest incarceration rate of any other country on this planet. It is 5 times the worldwide average. And depending on what study you look at, it's either Russia or Korea that is a distant second. The other thing that's really important to know is that only 7% of people who struggle with substance use disorder do not have trauma in their backgrounds. So we need to be looking at trauma in every aspect of people's lives. And because we have learned in treatment courts that it's really hard for people to talk about trauma, to uncover that trauma, to manage that trauma. And so we need to get them sort of stabilized. We need to give them a dose of treatment before we can help them start working on those trauma issues in both mental health courts and drug courts. So currently we have drug courts now in 10 of our 11 counties, which I'm really happy about. In 2016, I worked with the legislature to get statewide funding to support all of these drug courts. So they are actually funded through the general fund budget through the state. Before that, one county would maybe get a federal grant, another county would start a pilot project without any money, another county would convince their county administration to fund it. So it was kind of all over the map. And my hope for the future is to take the same approach with mental health courts. So here you can see the history of mental health courts as well. We had, at the same time that we had this war on drugs, we had the deinstitutionalization of individuals with mental illness, which was a good thing. It was well intended. And the idea was, when we reduce that sort of over hospitalization of people, we need to reinvest in our community mental health system. Unfortunately, that reinvestment did not occur fully. And again, the courts and jails were flooded with people who have some serious mental health issues. So we do have, and that you'll see a chart later on, we have mental health courts in 6 of our 10 counties. And the difference between the two basically depends on an assessment. We do a risk need assessment of everybody who might qualify for drug court or mental health court to figure out where's the right fit for them. What are their most prominent needs? How do we address those needs? So for folks in mental health court, they really have a persistent, serious mental illness. And that's their predominant feature. And, you know, we don't always get it right. I had a case in Stratford County where we started someone off in mental health court and that wasn't the right fit. So we moved her to drug court and now she's doing well. But again, I'll emphasize how important it is for both of these models to be addressing both substance use and mental health issues. So I know I'm going to just keep to my 15 minutes, but let me tell you how they actually work. In the traditional sort of criminal justice system, me as a Superior Court judge without these options would listen to the state argue for probably incarceration, the defense would argue for suspended time, and those would be sort of my only options. And it was really adversarial, and it was really sort of a debate and an argument. But what we do in mental health court and drug courts is we create a team. So each of those teams in both courts has the same judge, the same prosecutor, the same defense attorney, the same treatment provider, the same recovery support person, the same probation officer, and the same person maybe from the jail. So all of those folks work together and they go to trainings together to understand addiction, to understand mental health issues, to understand how the brain works, and to understand that our criminal justice response is not always one that's going to help people get better. And so we identify those people early in the process. Hopefully by the time of arrest, the public defender usually has a good sense of what the needs are for these people. And the other thing I want to tell you about these courts is that we don't want to build them so that we can arrest people and put them into the court system to get them treatment. That's not the right approach. Lots of folks should be diverted at the first time they meet with law enforcement, diverted out of the system into treatment. But if we have somebody who's got a lengthy record, or it's a serious offense, or they have a severe substance use disorder, severe mental health issue, and they are at high risk for reoffending if we don't address those issues, then we treat them in our mental health and drug courts. And what we do is we have somebody enter a plea of guilty. They get a suspended sentence instead of an imposed sentence. They get a period of probation, and then they come to court, usually weekly, to meet with a judge and talk about how they've been doing. They also will appear at treatment, and for drug court, it's 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. They may start with inpatient if that's what's required. They have regular recovery support activities, case management services, random drug testing. And I'll just tell you this quick little story. For people in drug court, if they were on traditional probation, they would be told to show up every other Wednesday for a drug test at probation. And so if they are not getting those kind of treatment services to understand how their brain works, they'll stop using on Tuesday, test negative on Wednesday, start using again on Thursday. So we do random drug testing, both to help us know what the needs are and for the participant to know they have the safety net. They do regular reporting to probation, random home visits, and mental health court and drug courts are very similar. They have this team approach. They have accountability and treatment together. They try to target people that we know are going to be coming through our court system if we don't deal with those underlying issues. We use incentives, sanctions and incentives, sanctions, and treatment adjustments to help with behavior modification. And so we use those models both in mental health and drug courts. And mental health courts are a little bit different. We don't use the same type of sanctions. We use kind of different incentives, those kinds of things. And what I will tell you is that the drug courts are felony drug courts. They're in all of our superior courts. The mental health courts, most of them are in circuit court because that's where we find folks struggling with these persistent mental health issues. There are a couple in superior court. And so depending on what the needs are, depending on the model, we may place people in one or the other program. Now, what we know nationally is there are national best practice standards for drug courts. They have not yet been developed for mental health courts, unfortunately. So New Hampshire took a stab at creating them anyway. And we created some guidelines instead of standards because they haven't quite been studied yet. But we were actually asked to present at the National Association of Drug Court Professionals on our national standards, that we modeled them mostly after the drug court standards and made adjustments where appropriate. So finally in New Hampshire, we have some guidance. And our next step is to create an office of treatment court basically within the court system, so that we'll have a head person like Alex, and then we will have a statewide mental health court coordinator, a statewide drug court coordinator, a statewide family court coordinator when that gets up and running, and then we have our housing services so we can have a more robust model going forward. Last thing I'll say is nationally, there are over 4,000 felony drug treatment courts. And nationally, there are about 500 or so mental health courts. So you can see there's a difference. And I think it's because the mental health court model, though it's showing promising progress, has not been fully sort of empirically studied like drug courts, but that is on its way here. So we're doing pretty well in New Hampshire when you compare ourselves to the nation. And that's all I have to say. Happy to answer questions as they come up, but I'd love for Alex to talk a little bit more in detail, and then we're going to hear from Shelley about mental health courts. So thank you. And I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Judge Nadeau. And thank you, everybody. So I am going to also share a couple slides, although hopefully that doesn't give the folks at NAMI heartburn because I didn't tell them I was going to. So let me just see if I can find the right screen. Can you see my slideshow?
Almost. There it is. No worries. We're happy that you have slides, Alex.
All right. Can you see it?
Yeah, that's it.
And I did not mean to share from there. I wanted to share from here. Okay. So I figured I'll just have this up while I'm
we can see your notes if you don't. I don't care about that if you don't care about that.
Okay, yeah, there really aren't any notes. It's just what's going to come up next. So I guess there won't be a surprise when I switch slides. Oh, I'm only gonna have up 2 or 3 slides while I talk. So this is just kind of show you the adult drug courts, family treatment courts, veterans tracks, and the mental health courts, where they are, in the state. So if anybody was interested, like what counties they are in or what circuit courts they're in, these are the different locations. So essentially, the adult drug courts have been around for about 35 years, just one year shy of that. And so, as Judge Nadeau had said, it's first started off in Miami-Dade, and they wanted to create a program that would be able to divert people from going to state prison or to jail on felonies that had drug charges. And it looked very, very different back then. And over the course of the past 35 years, the drug court model has evolved. And back then it was, they would take sometimes first-time offenders. They weren't really doing risk assessments. And so over the course of that time, things have changed. We now have the best practice standards for the adult drug courts. And like Judge Nadeau had said, we don't have those on the mental health court side yet. So now things look very, very different. Now with the adult drug courts, you're looking at the high-risk, high-need individual that was discovered to have a better outcome with this type of intense program than a low-risk individual. And so when it came to creating them in New Hampshire, we started them probably 5 or 6 years before best practice standards came out. So the first 2 or 3 drug courts were kind of operating on some old practices, but then once best practices came out, we all changed and adapted what we were doing. And then all of the newer drug courts that were created after 2016, when the legislation was passed to have statewide drug courts, they all follow best practice standards. And so as an example as to how the landscape of these programs continues to evolve, I was about a month ago working with the Miami-Dade team, and they were looking at adding additional tracks, and they were looking at changing and adapting some of their practices and changing their phase structure. So even the first drug court in the country is still looking to make sure that they're aligned with best practices, making sure that they're addressing all the participants that they can probably address, and then what that would look like. And so these programs are continually changing based on the research that's discovered as time goes on. And I'm confident that the mental health courts will eventually get to that point too, where there will be best practice standards. Right now, we just don't have them. And so we created our own guidelines, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But with the adult drug courts, we started off with enabling legislation. We went to the legislature and said, hey, we want to be able to create legislation for the drug courts that says this is a good idea. If you would like to create a drug court in your county, the court supports it, and it should look at least like this. And it was based on the 10 key components of a drug court. So it was really a skeletal outline of what a program should look like if you were going to create one. From that point, 5 or 6 years down the road, then we were able to have some new legislation which looked into funding. All the different players, Democrats, Republicans, at the legislative level, recognize that this program works, and it also is kind of bipartisan because it reunites families, it gets people out of jail, it saves money, and holistically it just makes that person whole again. So it was decided in 2016 that they would create legislation to be able to fund adult drug courts in every county. Now, over the course of having run those for the past 7 years, if you were to walk into any drug court, you would be able to recognize where you are, because they all look and operate the same, but they're slightly different. And that slight difference, they're still following best practice standards, but all of their resources are a little bit different depending on the jurisdiction. It looks a little bit different if you're in a rural area as opposed to an urban area. If you're in Manchester versus Lancaster, New Hampshire, there are just slightly different resources available to the participants, to the program itself. So you can recognize that it's a drug court if you were just wander into court one day, but it would slightly be different. So they're still following best practices, but just wanted to point out that there are some nuances. There can be some, slight changes and shifts based on the local resources that program might have. So when we talk about mental health courts, I wanted to take some time to talk about the sequential intercept model. As most of you are probably already aware of this, there's different levels of intercept, and the mental health courts are primarily looking at intercept number 3, which is where you see the specialty court block in there. And so currently the judicial branch is looking to do a sequential intercept model mapping training in every county. We started off with Merrimack County, and it went over really well. That was probably about 2 months ago. And we are now going to have Center for State Governments come and train individuals on how to be a sequential intercept model mapping trainer, so that we can then take that and go into every county to make sure that every county has this available. And it's a 2-day process. It's very lengthy. You pull in all the players, and you basically just map out what's available in our county for resources, what's not available, what's lacking, where can we fill in the gaps, so that we have a wider range of options when it comes to people that are arrested that also have a mental health diagnosis. Can we divert them into intercept 0 or 1? Do they even need to go and be detained? And if they are detained, then what can we do with that intercept? And if they do come in to the court system, are they eligible for a mental health court? So, having all these off ramps, rather than just having somebody arrested because they're off their medications and then they end up in jail for a long period of time. this hopefully will solve some of those issues. But in order to do that, we need to know what's available in that particular jurisdiction. We did have some enabling legislation for mental health courts years ago. That's been in existence for quite some time. And although we don't have pending legislation to help fund mental health courts in every jurisdiction, we are writing, we wrote some federal grants, and hopefully we'll get some of those to be able to help out with some resources, be able to help out with some training, with a database for those programs. And in addition to that, we created our statewide guidelines. So those guidelines is a document that we will put it in the chat. You can click on it if you want. You can read through it if you'd like. And it is took us over a year to create this. There were many stakeholders across New Hampshire that helped, and we also partnered with Center for State Governments. And it was a lot of work. And so although these are not best practice standards, because we're not a research organization, we didn't have comparison groups and all that, we feel that if you're going to have a mental health court, it'd be best if you follow these guidelines, knowing that we're not enforcing these. We're also not able to give additional resources to a program that would like to start a mental health court or currently has one to be able to follow the guidelines. But if you are interested in adapting and changing some of your practices, here's some things that you might be able to do to make your mental health court operate a little bit differently. And so I wanted to take just a minute to talk about this right here, which is the high risk, high need, low risk, low need model. So the SIM mapping, unfortunately, is two-dimensional. It doesn't really talk about risk and need assessments. So same thing on the mental health court side as in the adult drug court side. To take somebody in, you should be doing a risk and needs assessment, and the program itself should be tailored towards that person's risk and need. So if you are, I know some of our mental health courts have more than one track, which I think is fantastic, because if you're a low risk person, meaning you haven't been involved in the criminal justice system for a very long time, you have good family supports, but you have a mental health diagnosis and you get arrested, you don't need to see the judge every single week. You don't need the intense supervision that somebody that's high risk might need. So by having more than one track, that person can go onto a low risk track and maybe see the judge once a month, but they're still going to get the treatment. They're still going to get the support of counselors. If you're a high risk individual and you have a diagnosis, then that person should be seen more often by probation parole, by the judge, to make sure that they're following their treatment plan. And so this ARC program is more geared towards substance abuse disorder and not so much the SIM mapping, but it kind of is more 3D, so you can turn it and see where on the intercept and on the risk need profile, what program best suits that individual. And with that being said, I am done with my section.
So Judge Neto, did you want to answer any of the questions before we go over to Shelley?
Sure, yeah, and Shelley could chime in too. I did answer a couple of them in writing, but here's a very good question. So my loved one with severe substance use disorder and dual diagnosis needs to have a felony charge before getting this help. That is an excellent question. And that's why Alex's presentation is important, because we want to start educating everyone in the criminal justice system about each intercept. If somebody ends up getting a call from law enforcement gets called and they come to a scene, the first thing that should happen is an assessment of whether or not that person even needs to be arrested. And when we tried some of these sequential intercept mapping meetings many years ago, just having the chief of police at the same table with the CEO of the community mental health center was an important connection to make, because they made an agreement that police would contact her organization before making an arrest to see if that person qualified. Oftentimes people qualified and didn't know it and couldn't get themselves to that mental health service. So you are absolutely right. We do not want to arrest people for a felony just to get them these services. But this model is for the people that would otherwise be arrested and need to be arrested, and we are using it instead of jail or prison. So hopefully that answers the question. And the second one, I think maybe Shelley might be better able to answer. There is a mental health court in Brentwood Circuit Court, and the information this person is getting from the Rockingham County Attorney's Office is that without a formal diagnosis, the person can't go through mental health court. And the example is, what if there's an adult child suffering from a specific condition but refuses to release records showing his diagnosis? What would happen in that case, Shelley?
That's a great question. What I find and what we encourage in our mental health court is communication. So it might not be, we'll have different ways of receiving referrals. So in Grafton County, anyone can refer. So, but sometimes it's a little bit different depending on the county. But I do know that usually the liaisons for mental health court or the coordinators really welcome conversations with people who want to call in and discuss paths to the mental health courts, and therefore kind of explain the process. Assessments are important, and we know that right off the bat for anybody with a substance use disorder or mental health disorder or suspected, right? We might not know exactly what's going on for someone, so that's why the assessments are so important. So getting that diagnosis can be super helpful because then we can know what to do next. But sometimes a screening can happen more quickly. Or sometimes we can get documents from prior assessments to kind of pull forward and help move things in the right direction. But I feel like dialogue, real conversations with people can really, I know it helps me figure out what the next steps might be. It helps start to build a team, and it also can pull in family members and, the defendant themselves. So,
and what Shelley's describing, that is a great answer. And Shelley's describing the need that we have for assessing all the mental health courts, figuring out where they are different, whether we should make changes to make them more consistent. So that's kind of our next goal for when we actually hire a statewide mental health court coordinator, for that person to go out and assess all the mental health courts and see, are they using sort of the same important pieces of the guidelines, although there will continue to be differences. But I love the answer, Shelley. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So Shelley, you want to go ahead and tell us about mental health courts in New Hampshire?
I would love to. Thank you for having me. I'm here and happy to be here on behalf of kind of our collective effort around the state of New Hampshire, working with all of our mental health courts. As already mentioned, we meet monthly. We're a dedicated group of people. Michelle Wagner, you meet with us as well. Alex Casali, you're there with us as well. Susan, you've been there with us in the past. It's a group effort, and we're really dedicated to trying to do the absolute best work that we can. So we talk a lot, we share a lot. All of our programs, yes, are a little bit different, but we're trying to figure out, okay, since they're different, that's a strength. We can learn from each other, what works best, what resources do we have, what resources don't we have, so that we can continue to do the best we can with what we have. So I'm here on everyone's behalf. I am obviously, my specialty is in Grafton County. We are a very rural county and large. We have 3 mental health court programs in our county. And we received our first referral in 2011, and we received a Center for it was a Justice and Mental Health Collaboration grant through the Council of State Governments. It was a 2-year grant. It was for planning and implementation. Grassroots started, a group of people, dedicated people, including some people that are still involved in our organization, still got together monthly and said, this is what we need. We have to do something. We have a problem where individuals with mental illness are getting stuck in our criminal justice system, and we don't know what to do. So that's how a lot of our mental health courts started. And we've been going since then. And we are our programs are out of the circuit courts in Plymouth, Littleton, and Lebanon. However, we do take felony referrals that are going to be downgraded to misdemeanors, and several of our mental health courts run that way. And as mentioned, we do have in New Hampshire a few of our programs that also have separate Superior Court felony level mental health courts as well. In our mental health court programs in Grafton County, all 3 of them have veteran tracks. And we really wanted to have kind of a specialized response to the work we do with our veteran population. So we started working with our VAs, and we currently have on our team a Veterans Justice Outreach worker who really specializes in working with justice-involved veterans. So that person provides clinical case management to our veteran track participants. The Veterans Track is a track under our mental health court, so offered a lot of the same benefits and support services as working with the team, coming to court monthly. But they do have that direct liaison to the Veterans Justice Outreach worker and the VA services, as well as community supports and resources as well. So we're very lucky to have that. And there are other New Hampshire mental health courts that also run this way or have separate veterans courts. Something I know for a fact is that all of our New Hampshire mental health courts, although we run a little differently, depending on the court, we really strive for the same things. We honoring the value of relationship building with the participants, their families, any support systems they have is paramount. We do exit surveys for when participants complete, whether successfully or not. And what we hear often is, we know how important perceived justice is. When someone's involved in a program and they feel like people are really listening to them and understanding their side of things and where they're coming from and why they're doing what they're doing, and they can speak that and share it, that goes a long way towards trust building. And then, then you can really start to identify with individuals and treat them as individuals and have a better response. That's what we're trying to do. Also, we strive to have clear expectations so that when individuals come into the program, they really know what they're signing on to. And then we continue to clarify as we go. So that's important for participants. It's also important for every team member and for our programs. So if we have clarity in what we're doing as best we can, that really helps others feel more comfortable and engage in a program. So that's what we hope to do. And when we do that, we can more easily address symptoms and then target behavioral changes, right? Because then you're getting more personal into people's lives. And that's where the trust really comes in and is important to do that. And to treat people with that level of respect that we are listening and we're understanding and we're trying to include them, because it is a fact that they are part of the team. They're the most important part of the team. And we need their input to help get the resolutions that they want and that everybody else wants as well. With some participants in mental health court, so there's treating mental illness, substance use disorders, symptoms. And then there's also addressing criminal thinking or antisocial belief systems and behavioral patterns. Those are things that treatment can assist with. There are a lot of different evidence-based treatments to help people really recover in those areas, as well as case management, basic needs. If someone doesn't have their basic needs met, housing, a substantial income, those things can really impair someone's progress. Also, some individuals struggle with antisocial peer groups. It's human nature. We all want to be part of having relationships with other people. But what's good for us, right? Who's healthy to hang out with? Who's healthy? How do we do that? Some individuals have developmental impairments or dysfunctional family systems. And that's something we can get involved with too and help there. Homelessness, we know that's a problem as well. If someone even has treatment, but they lose their housing and they have to move away from that treatment, that's an issue. So we try to wrap around all of that, including insurance, and make sure people have insurance to kind of pay for all those pieces to get that support that they need. We mentioned trauma, that's a whole nother piece. As we know, symptoms of mental illness can impair people to the point where they become justice involved. So law enforcement, or people may struggle to even get to treatment due to depression, anxiety, past trauma due to treatment or lack of treatment, psychosis, impulse control. So those are a lot of things that we find people really struggle with, and that's real for them in the moment. So we all strive to meet individuals where they're at. What I love about mental health courts and the treatment courts is we can help by slowing the process down for individuals to meet them where they are at. So we're not just pushing people along. People will not gain from that. They're not going to benefit. So if we can slow the process down, give them extra protection and understanding from the community, that just because someone's entered into a mental health court doesn't mean they're going to just be well. It takes time. And so we support and help other people understand that process and where we're at. And that's hugely important. And then, every human being has motivation for change. You just have to kind of help people find what their motivation is, and then what will drive someone. And that ties into our incentives program, which is hugely important in mental health. I love this part. It feels good for us. It feels good to our participants. And in Grafton County, we are so very lucky to have a nonprofit that we developed. We currently have a board, a group of 5 individuals that are volunteers that created this nonprofit. It's called the Advocates for Grafton County Mental Health Court. There's a website. This extremely devoted group of individuals works closely with me all the time. We're so thankful for the work they do. They provide education and awareness about mental health courts in Grafton County, and they've done so also at the state level. They helped us get started, our programs in Grafton County, but also they raise funds. They write grants and we make the most amazing newsletters, and you can check it out on the website. There are newsletters about participants, so stories of people who have really found this program life-changing. And to those people, I'm so very thankful for their work, but this money helps support financially. We have incentives, money, cash, that we can buy gift cards. We can also help with basic needs. So if someone needs rent for a month, that's happened. If someone needs gas money to get to appointments, we can offer those cards. Those things just help the barriers, since there's so many out there anyway, barriers. It helps us kind of move past some of those more quickly, so we can help people, and then they feel instantly supported. So we're very grateful and thankful to be able to have those people in our lives. And Michelle, did you want to add anything here?
Sure, I would love to, because I am a family member
Yes, you are.
whose loved one went through mental health court, and it was a decade ago, and it was early on in his mental health journey. And so we didn't know what things were going to look like. And what had happened was he had a manic event and he did destruction within my condo. And I was really on the fence. Do I report this? What if he goes on to do something bigger? I mean, I just didn't know what this might lead to. And there was an option through Seacoast Mental Health Center where he was receiving services. They said there is mental health court. If you do press charges, he would be able to enter mental health court. And it was a lot of soul searching to decide whether or not I wanted to do that. But I felt like there was a safety net, and I felt like he would be taken care of. And so I did press charges, and he did enter mental health court and completed it. It was life-changing. I am such an advocate of mental health court. So that is why I sit in on those meetings as the family perspective. And with that, I would love to turn it over to Ebony to talk about her personal experience.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for having me here. I just want to check and make sure everybody can hear me okay. All right. My name is Ebony. I am a former participant in the Community Connections program through the Manchester District Court. And I just wanted to share with you a little bit about my experience with the mental health court and where I'm at now. So in order to give you a little bit of a background so you know what led me there, I'm just going to share a little tiny bit about how I got there. So I, as a child, had a lot of childhood trauma, and that childhood trauma led me to live a life undiagnosed. So my coping skill was at the age of 13 to start using drugs and alcohol. So me using the drugs and alcohol clouded my judgment enough where I got into unhealthy relationships, got into some trouble with, you know, hanging out with the wrong crowds, dropping out of school, giving up sports, all the things that I cared about kind of went to the wayside. And one of those unhealthy relationships that I got into, it was very physical, and it was very unhealthy. I continued to use drugs and alcohol throughout that whole entire relationship. I had my first child at the age of 16, 2 months after my 16th birthday. Eventually got married, had 2 more children, but none of the problems went away. So eventually in 2014, myself and my significant other had gotten into one last physical altercation. The police were called and I ended up getting arrested. So I was going to court and I was facing 4 felony charges. And my lawyer had presented to me to get into the Community Connections program and explained a little bit about what that would entail. And my first reaction, because of my own stigma against mental health, was I'm not crazy. I'm not going to mental health services. I'm not doing this. Like, it wasn't me, it was him, and, you know, all of the things that come along with this stigma about mental health. And he said, you know, just give it a try, see, you know, if it helps. And, you know, you have this option to have your charges expunged or annulled. And so I was like, ooh, that sounds okay. All right, I'll give it a try. So immediately, you know, I took it as a punishment. I'm like, I'm being punished for this. This is, you know, all wrong. I was very uncomfortable, very scared. But when I met with the liaison and they gave me the initial assessment and they gave me my diagnosis and told me that I could get treatment and that this was something that we could work with, it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is why I have been this way this whole time. And I'll share with you my diagnosis just because I want you to know the severity of what I was dealing with on my own, coping by myself. So my diagnosis was borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, anxiety, and substance use disorder. So all of these things I'm dealing with on my own, trying to cope. But when he explained this stuff to me and said that there was treatment, it was like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And finally, I could breathe and I could say, okay, maybe this isn't a punishment. Maybe this is something that was meant to happen at this moment so that I could, you know, better myself. And so I went through the treatment. I got into North End Counseling, which is a part of the Mental Health Center of Greater Manchester. It was very, very hard looking at myself and looking at the things that were eating away at me deep down in my being, and working on those things. I have to say, though, it was definitely worth it. And because I bought into this and I was at a point where I was ready and I was just tired of living a life of just misery, I, you know, worked my hardest. I did everything that they suggested. And I graduated the Community Connections program after a year. My charges were annulled. And a couple years after that, well, probably like a few years after, I decided to go and work at the mental health center as a peer support specialist. I also, while working, achieved my certified recovery support worker certificate. So the team that I work on is the assertive community treatment team. So I work with people with severe and persistent mental illness. A lot of them have substance use disorder too. And this is the most rewarding job I've ever had. I never could keep a job more than like 3 months, and I've been at the company for 5 years as of the 16th of this month. In January, I celebrated 9 years of recovery, and I am just so excited. I go back into the court systems and I speak with people who are signing into the Community Connections program, share my experience with them, let them know that this is not a punishment, that you can really better yourself. And I let them know that I've been through it, that it is hard work, but it's so worth it. And that's why I'm sharing my story today. It's because I want everybody to know, what I went through and how I did it, and the fact that it is possible and that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. So thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate it. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Ebony, that is such a great story. You are an inspiration, and I hope you know how valuable you are as a recovery support peer, because we are fast learning and we are including them in our drug courts and our mental health courts, that they're really that missing piece of connection between the work the team does and for the participant to understand the value of it. So you make that connection, and we wouldn't be successful without people like you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And there's lots of clap hands and hearts and celebrations going up for that. I did just want to put the email addresses for myself, for Shelley, and for Alex into the chat so folks have those. And some questions have come through that our panelists have been answering. Is there any information you want to share with the group about those questions or comments that have come through? Someone mentioned the holistic approach, and
Yeah,
I think many of us have felt that's been missing in treatment and care for our loved ones.
right. That is such a great point. And that's what I love about both mental health court and drug court, is even the judges were trained to be motivational. When I first started on the bench, I learned I order someone to do something, and if they don't do it, then they're in trouble. Instead, now I learn I'm not a treatment person, but I can use those techniques by asking people, what's working for you? What's not working for you? Tell me more about that. How did you do this week? Tell me about your new job, or tell me what the struggle is with getting your kids back, just having a real conversation with them. And also including in that whole picture, addressing trauma. I mean, we've actually learned the point at which you should address trauma. It's not necessarily in the beginning. The point at which you should address that criminal thinking, that's not necessarily in the beginning. So we learn not only what we should be addressing, but when and how we should be addressing it, and how the team can do it consistently so that we're all sort of using that same motivational approach. And the other thing I would like to say is, we all know, Shelley talked about this, that housing can be such a barrier to people being successful. And, I try to imagine, and I can't, what it's like to not have stable housing and try to be taking care of yourself. I mean, it's nearly impossible. So we got funding about 3 years ago through the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Other Drugs for community housing program. And right now, the way it's worded, it's for people who are in drug court and people who are coming out of prison. It's sort of temporary bridge housing. It helps people get on their feet. It helps them get stable enough to start paying for their own. We have relationships with sober houses, landlords, believe it or not. And through that program, we're able to teach community leaders about the value of mental health and drug court. So our goal is to hopefully extend that to the mental health court community. Luckily, we've been demonstrating the success of the program, so I think it won't be hard to argue why it should be applied in all of the treatment court models. So that's another hope on the horizon.
That is fabulous news. And Karen Santuccio is saying, I'm a case manager at the Carroll County DOC, Department of Corrections, and all of this sounds wonderful. We have such a need for finding placement and programs for those with substance use disorder and mental health. I would love to see Carroll County get funding for the ability to have mental health court. How realistic is this? What timeline might we be looking at?
Well, I can say, I think we received statewide funding for drug courts in 2016. This budget cycle was the first year we asked for increased funding for the drug court budget, which we received. So I feel like now that we're proving the value of treatment courts, my hope and the next step is to make that convincing case for the funding of mental health courts through the general budget so that we can fund more of these programs and make sure they have all the right components to them. And my guess is, I can say this, well, it's my hope, but 18 months to 2 years, looking at, I know that sounds kind of far away, but putting together a plan for, maybe even incremental funding, but something to happen concretely within that time frame.
I could also just offer a thought. Kind of funding can kind of roll in, on its own pace, but something that can always be done ahead of time is connecting with others. And so I will put myself out there as a contact to talk with you and with anybody who wants to get together in your county to start learning about the mental health. We could invite you to one of our mental health courts to observe or to talk to the team or to help in any way, just kind of get you started, or even think about who you might want to bring to the table to start talking with. So to throw that out there, there's lots of help, because that is our hope, to kind of share and keep sharing. So today we kind of speak with all the counties in mind that do not have, mental health courts. So great question. Thank you.
And I was so surprised that there were so few mental health courts in relation to drug courts when I learned that statistic, because as I said, it was about a decade ago that we used mental health court, and it was just so effective. So I'm a real advocate for getting them statewide. Alex, is there something you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody, and I saw that Karen had written something else, and to kind of address her issue. So there is a adult drug court in her county, and it looks like she's saying that she would like to see that the jail reentry program be part of the drug court. And depending on the policies and all that, I always like that the programs are able to play off of one another. I don't know exactly how it looks like in Carroll County, but I know in many other counties, if the jail has a jail program, a bail supervision program, and a drug court and a mental health court, that somebody can be in a drug court, they abscond 2 or 3 times, they need treatment, but they just can't stick around. Maybe we put them in the jail program for a month, and then we take them back on a drug court. So if they can work independently and in conjunction with each other, then absolutely. I think that would be ideal. So I'm sure that if you talk to the drug court, maybe there's something that you guys can work out.
That sounds great. And we have just a couple of minutes left. Any other questions?
And so I did want to talk about funding a little bit. So there's not a whole lot of federal grants that come out for statewide mental health court funding, but there are individual jurisdictions that can apply for, we want to start a mental health court in our one little jurisdiction. That is available. However, it's only limited to governmental entities that can apply. So for example, the entity that runs the drug court in Carroll County, it's the Community Mental Health Center. And so the judicial branch contracts with them to run the drug court. So they can't apply to get funding to also do the mental health court, but maybe the county could apply on their behalf, and they could just be a partner and have an MOU. And so those usually come out like in the winter time, and it would just be for that one jurisdiction. But those are available usually through SAMHSA or BJA.
Great, thank you.
Also, Michelle, just really quickly, Grafton County did 2 separate cost savings studies for mental health court. So again, if someone's not incarcerated, the county doesn't have to pay for them to be incarcerated. And then also if they're not incarcerated, then there are psychotropic medications that they aren't being paid for. They can utilize insurance in the community and so on and so forth. So we have those studies to share that information. If anybody would like to have it, we're happy to share.
Excellent. And they have your email addresses now. They can take that out of the chat. Just a reminder, reach out to Shelley or Alex if you have any questions, and NAMI New Hampshire has the information and resource line. So please, you can email us, you can call us and get connected, and we'll help you in whatever way we can. Judge Neto, is there any closing words you want to impart before we say goodbye?
No, I am so grateful to NAMI for inviting us. I think these kind of connections with community leaders and the court system and treatment providers is so important to keep us all educated. So I appreciate the invitation.
We're very grateful to have you here. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you so very much for addressing this topic today. Just a reminder, a recording of today's discussion will be posted on the education page of onwardnh.org. You will receive an email in the next couple of days, which will include links for the website along with an evaluation link. Once you've completed that survey, you'll automatically receive a certificate of attendance in case you want one of those. For questions or comments, please reach out to me, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care. Thank you so much, all.